There is a lot going on right this second, and a lot of people are asking questions, such as, is my money safe? Am I going to lose it all? What is going to happen? That's what I want to do, is teach you about these things. There's a lot of terms, a lot of companies that are being talked about, whether it's a bank or it's your brokerage account, whether it's SIPC insurance or FDIC insurance or ERISA. What in the world is all of this? Let me break it down for you. If we haven't met, I'm Eric with Jazz Wealth Managers, where we don't just invest your dough. I want to do exactly what I'm going to do right this second, and that is educate you on your dough. I want to make sure you understand what is going on with your money. And so really the first one I want to start with is FDIC. That is one that you've heard a lot about when it comes to all this banking mess that is out there right this second, and it's, was your money safe? Well, generally speaking, FDIC is going to cover a certain amount. And first, let's go ahead and take a look at what FDIC is. It was created to maintain stability and public confidence in the nation's financial system, which I think many of you are probably watching this saying, well, I don't have a lot of confidence right now. Maybe that's you. But it's an independent agency of the federal government. And the fact is their goal there is to ensure accounts for making sure that if something were to happen to a bank, that your money is safe. Now, what's interesting though is in regular times, how this works is if you have $250,000 in your account per depositor. So if you're married and you have a joint account and it's you and your wife, well, that increases it to $500,000 because $250 per depositor. But if it's a single person, then you're looking at $250,000 is what they are going to cover if the bank goes under. Now, we've heard recently that that's not always the case. The government has said, hey, well, we're stepping in right this second with SVB and all this other Signature Bank, both of them failing and saying, we're going to cover all the deposits. Now, what people don't realize is they say, well, that's not really fair. What does this all mean? Well, let me break that down for you real quick too. There were so many companies that were using SVB as a bank, a lot of tech companies that were out there, a lot of startups. All of these companies, their profits go into this bank. Then from when the profits go into the bank, then they have to operate from those profits payroll. Well, yes, payroll is higher than $250,000, they're in trouble because if the bank fails, only $250,000 could be covered. So instead, these banks now, or the government now has stepped in and said, hey, we're going to make sure that everybody is made whole just so that all of these companies can get their money and make payroll and keep going, because if they weren't able to, that could create a major problem for a lot of people. And so that's really a small snippet of that and what's going on there. I would hope that if another bank fails, maybe the government steps up and you're in that case, then they'll make sure that you're made whole as well. But in general, focus on the FDIC and don't keep more than $250,000 per depositor. Now, there are ways with the banks that some of these banks are actually doing things now where they're saying, well, your money is here, but they share it within other banks. And so it spreads it out and increases the amount that you can have in a bank that is FDIC insured, because it's not just technically at one bank, it's at a few different banks. There's funds that are like that. So look into that if you get into that. If you have the problem of having that much money in a bank, it's a good thing to have, but you make sure you protect it there. Now, what about brokerage accounts? So Fidelity, Vanguard, we use Goldman Sachs, all of these companies where your money is being parked. Well, they're regulated a bit different. They're covered by SIPC. Now, SIPC was founded in about 50 years ago by Congress. And what SIPC is covering there is $500,000 for stocks and bonds, but up to $250,000 for cash. Now, the big thing that most people don't understand with this, though, is that SIPC is not there to say, well, hey, if you lose money because the market falls, we're going to give you $500,000. That is not the case. Instead, it's if something happens, the brokerage firm that you are with goes under, then that is where they're going to step in. And if you had losses due to the firm going under, then they could step in and have make you whole there up to $500,000 or up to $250,000 of just cash sitting there. Now, some people will open up accounts with us right this second. We positioned ourselves in a certain way where we were taking from when the market was performing extremely well. We slowed our accounts down a bit and created some cash. We put that cash in FDIC insured ETFs or in funds so that not ETFs, but just funds. That allowed us to have that money insured separately than the SIPC insurance funds. So it's a little bit of an interesting play there on how all of this works. I know it can get really confusing, but that's just to give you a general breakdown. Now, then you also have ERISA. ERISA covers your 401k. So your 401k is totally separate, but it's more of a law and a regulatory. It was set up in 1974. When you become an advisor, you got to learn all about all these silly things. But ERISA is really to regulate the 401ks, the employer retirement plans, when it comes to everything there. Now, ERISA is regulating that, but still, if, let's say, a company goes under that you work for, maybe your company goes bankrupt, ERISA is in place there to make sure that you're made whole with everything within that company and that you're still getting the money you have. There's laws in place. But as far as the insurance goes, then it goes back to where's the money held. So if you have, Fidelity as your 401k provider, that is where it's going to fall back there on more of that SIPC insurance. Now, there's other organizations that are out there that regulate a lot of this. There's Finra, there is the SEC, but if a brokerage firm closes, so this really breaks this down. There's a lot of information here on Finra that you can look up as well that really just tells you that they're going to, and they have done this in the past, work with you to make sure that everything is transferred over to a separate firm, or the company as a whole is just bought out and somebody else takes on that book of business, all of what you have. Now, if you're sitting there holding stocks or bonds or anything, you're probably wondering, well, what happens to those? That's a digital record now. Used to, you had all these little paper stock certificates. I've seen a lot of those cool little things to look at, but personally haven't ever owned one, I don't think. But when it comes to this, how it's going to work is you have a digital record of all of your stocks. So they're still able to know that, hey, you own all of these companies. Just because the brokerage firm goes under does not mean that you don't still have the investments. You still have those out there. Now, there's one other one that I wanted to go over that's totally separate than those, and that's an ETF or an index fund. What happens if you invest in an ETF and it goes under? Because if you invest in just an individual stock, you are taking the risk with the individual stock of it going up and down. Now, the goal is to diversify enough that if one company goes under, you're fine, because you've only got one out, not all of these others that you hold. But if you own an ETF and it holds all of the stocks in there, what happens? Well, generally how that's going to work is the ETF company is going to let you know in advance that they are going to be closing their shop. So, maybe it's because they're not, making enough revenue and they're just closing their business. They're an ETF, that's what they do is their business. And so if that's the case, they're going to let you know first. But also the brokerage firm that you're with, what's going to end up happening is that if you don't sell off, then you are going to have that ETF liquidated. So it will liquidate into cash for whatever the value is. So that money is still there. It's still your money, but now it's cash. So if you have a taxable account and you have a large gain, just be careful, because if the ETF is ever liquidated, then you're going to have to realize all of the gains on that account. So those are just different things to kind of give you a baseline of what's going on. Is your money safe? You can go to all of these. FDIC is FDIC.org. SIPC is SIPC.org. No, FDIC is FDIC.gov. Sorry, I want to make sure I get you that one right. Finra, you can look at that as well, Finra.org. All different things that you can go to make sure that you're educated on your dough.
Thanks for watching. If you want to watch more FinTips videos, click here. Be sure to like and subscribe also.